Good afternoon, welcome to Lunchtime Live. Let's start this hour with some exclusive breaking news. And Brentford have appointed Keith Andrews as their new head coach on a 3-year contract. He has been part of the coaching staff at the club for the last year, but it is his first top job in management. Let's head live to their training grounds and our reporter Lewis Mason. Good afternoon, just give us some more details if you can.
Yes, afternoon, Rob. Big news for Brentford, big news for Brentford fans. They know who their manager will be, and it will be a 3-year contract. So really exciting news this afternoon from West London. We're expecting an official announcement in the next couple of hours, and then we'll be able to know exactly how Keith Andrews is feeling about the deal. But what other information do we know at this stage? We know that as it currently stands, the club has yet to confirm the backroom staff who will be joining Keith Andrews, because of course Thomas Frank, when he went to Tottenham, did take a couple of members of his staff, so we are waiting for some confirmation on that. Sky Sports News immediately reported that Andrews was one of the leading candidates to take over from Frank for the coming season, and as we know, for the next 3 years. They did speak to a number of other high-profile candidates, but they did think that he absolutely has what it takes to follow in Frank's footsteps and continue to take Brentford forward.
Well, he's got a big task and a big man to follow, hasn't he, in Thomas Frank? Does it feel a little bit of a risk appointing someone in their first main role as a head coach?
Well, I think you've hit the nail on the head there, Rob. It is his first managerial role. He's done lots of assistant roles. He was an assistant at Republic of Ireland. Of course, he was on the coaching staff here as well at Brentford, and has done that at Sheffield United. But this isn't new territory for Brentford. It's really easy to forget, actually. This is exactly how Thomas Frank started. He was promoted from within as well when Dean Smith left the club. And 7 years later, of course, Brentford fans grew to love Thomas Frank quite a lot, and he did a lot for this club, including taking them into the Premier League. So they're not averse to giving someone a go, giving someone a bit of a trial and seeing if they can do it. And that's exactly what's happening with Keith Andrews. Whether the fans are going to be on side or not will be absolutely seen in the early stages of the Premier League season, I'm sure.
Well, as for the early stages of the Premier League season, he's got some pretty tricky fixtures early on.
Yeah, it is a little bit tough, isn't it, at the moment? What I think really is interesting about that is the fixtures that he's got at home, because the G-Tech has become this stadium that has got such an incredible atmosphere. Brentford do very well at home. Of course, we saw last season how prolific they were from set pieces, which was Keith Andrews' speciality. That was what he was here as a coach. They start away at Nottingham Forest, but as I said, they've then got some really tricky fixtures. Aston Villa, Chelsea and Manchester United, all coming up at home. But I think the fact that they are home games will give them a lot of confidence going into the new season with a new man at the helm.
Lewis, thank you very much indeed. Well, let's get some more reaction to this. And a man who knows Keith Andrews very well. They worked alongside each other as pundits here at Sky Sports. Delighted to say Jobi McAnuff is with us this Friday afternoon. Good afternoon to you, Jobi. It's been a pretty poorly kept secret for a long time that Keith Andrews is going to get this gig. When you first heard about it, was there any surprise at Brentford giving him this opportunity?
Yeah, when I first heard it, I did think it was a little surprising, just given how well they did last year. And again, for me, probably for the football club, thinking they wanted to maybe go with a little bit more experience, given their standing now in the Premier League and the fact that they are very much an established team there. But actually, now that the time has elapsed and you look at Brentford as a whole football club, and, you know, like we've just heard there, they were a club that gave Thomas Frank an opportunity, you know, promote him from within. So I think there's a lot there. They know Keith clearly as a character. I can understand maybe some people thinking it's a bit of a risk, given that he hasn't actually had a senior head coach role or management role himself, but he has been working a long time towards this. That I know very, very well. And again, I think the club are probably mitigating that risk a little bit with the fact that they know him personally. He knows the club inside out, and he has been working at Premier League level for the last 18 months.
We've got a poll on our website at the moment which is saying, is Keith Andrews the right man for the job? At the moment, only 33% are saying yes. Do you think that is mainly down to what you've just touched on, that it is his first main head coach role? And does that surprise you a little bit, given Brentford's previous success of appointing from within?
Yeah, listen, as I say, I can understand that slight bit of reservation maybe from fans and probably Brentford fans in particular. But I will say, he's got a fantastic reputation as a coach. Again, he's done the hard yards. He's been out there. He's put a lot of work in to get himself to this position. And certainly having worked with him and spent a lot of time covering games, I know it's something that he very much has been working towards for a long period of time now. So yes, I can understand some questions, but I would say to anyone who is asking questions, give him an opportunity. We don't see Premier League clubs in particular giving young British, English and Irish managers these opportunities. I think we need to do it more, particularly in this country. So I'm really pleased that Brentford have taken this step and are giving him that chance.
Would I be right in saying that you'd have been at Reading when Brian McDermott was appointed from within?
Correct, yeah.
And from a dressing room perspective, do managers like that sometimes need to earn respect a little bit more from a group of players because they've not come in from outside?
Yeah, it can be a hard transition. I think Brian's case was slightly different in that he wasn't actually on the coaching staff. He had a role a little bit higher up at the football club. Whereas Keith's been in there day in, day out. He will be with these players on the training ground. Every little detail, he would have gone through. I know there's been a lot made about him being a set piece coach, but speak to anyone at the football club. I know Justin Cochran very, very well, who's obviously departed with Thomas Frank. Keith was a lot more than just that. And he did have a huge impact when it did come to the set pieces, not just scoring them, but also in terms of from a defensive point of view. And it is such a huge part of the game. It's what's made Brentford so successful. They've had to identify how can we, give ourselves the best opportunity of not just staying in the Premier League initially, but really establishing ourselves, which they have done. But he's a lot more than that. And I just feel that, he's an all-round coach. He's got a great idea of the way that he wants the game to be played. And I think we'll start to see that if he's given the opportunity and the time that he's going to need in this first role.
Yeah, you talk about him there as an all-round coach. I think it was often a nod to him of that ridiculous run Brentford went on last season where they seemed to score in the first couple of minutes of every single game. Again, from the being part of the coaching staff perspective, how difficult is that balance, do you think, between carrying on the success that Thomas Frank has had, but also wanting to do things his own way?
Yeah, listen, Keith's an incredibly intelligent individual. And I think when you are taking over something that's been so successful, there'll be huge respect paid to what has been done before him. And there'll be, I'm sure, plenty there that he will carry on doing and not change too much. Of course, over time, I'm sure he'll want to put his own little tweak and stamp on things. But what he has got is an incredible foundation to go and work from. We often see new managers coming into roles and things are broken, which is why we see a change. It's a complete opposite. In Brentford's perspective, it can't have been going any better than it ever has at the football club. That's why Tottenham have come in and taken Thomas Frank. That's why their best players are being linked with moves away and continually they have to sell their best players. That is the model at the football club. Again, Keith knows that inside out. And I think that's a big part of this decision. We have to, give a bit of faith to the ownership group. Matthew Benham's done a brilliant job. I remember covering Brentford a lot throughout the EFL and, to see them where they are now, a large part of that is down to that sort of model at the whole club. So it's about more than just who that manager is. Yes, it's obviously super, super important. And it is a different role for him. It is a different dynamic. Of course it is. But again, he's been around long enough to know, I think, how to make that adjustment.
Just to pick up on a couple of points then, one about the owner, Matthew Benham, and obviously a lot of success that Brentford have had with things like recruitment is very data-driven and analytics. Do you get the sense, particularly with any conversations that you might have had with Justin Cochran, as to what sort of influence Keith will have on recruitment?
Yeah, listen, I think in terms of recruitment, they've got a very clear model, in terms of what they are and their identity, and they go and recruit around that. Again, they'll dive a little bit more down into positionally what they feel they need from a defensive midfielder, what they need from a wide player. And they have certain metrics, of course, that they follow, and they've got a system that is as good as anyone else in the world in terms of identifying that talent. So again, I think from his perspective, of course, when it comes down to maybe that final decision, he will have an input. Again, that word analytical, I think, is the perfect one to sum Keith up when we're sitting down, covering games. It's not just about sort of what's happened, it's sort of the how and the why. It'd always be drilling into the details, who hasn't done their job or what has someone done particularly well to create that little bit of an opportunity. So again, the way that he watches football and reads the game, I think will really suit him with the model at Brentford Football Club.
I'm sure he knows what's coming, but not easy when you're a new head coach, when you sit down for your first day in the job and think, oh, by the way, your captain's going and your top scorer's going as well. That's a bit of a baptism of fire, because they are two huge gaps to fill, aren't they, Brian and Burma? The goalkeeper, Mark Flecken's gone as well, and potentially Christian Norgard too.
Yeah, listen, it's a real summer of upheaval. There's no masking that. And again, listen, that is to do with how successful they have been over the last few years. But one thing with Brentford, and I think I'd put Brighton into that category in terms of how they run their operations, there's always a succession plan. There's always what's next, because that is just the world that they live in. They don't have the resources financially that some of the bigger clubs can, when it comes to holding on to players or even staff now that we're seeing. Bigger clubs come in and poaching and buying out managers now and staff as well. So I think from the football club's point of view, I've got every faith that, this is something that's been thought about in great detail. I'm sure there was a theory around Thomas Frank and the fact that at some point, if he continued to do as well as he was doing, that he would move on at some point. And this is just the next phase. So again, I think it's a football club that is very forward thinking. And I'm sure that they've made, their due diligence on this decision.
I think fixtures-wise, they start away at Forest, live on Sky Sports on the opening weekend. They've got some early home games against the likes of Villa and Chelsea. It goes without saying, it's the same for any new manager, isn't it, that you want to get some early points on the board. Otherwise, that pressure will start to grow very, very quickly.
Yeah, of course. And again, listen, someone who knows Keith as well as I do, he will not need anyone telling him that. I think when you're in and around the game, as long as he has been as a player and as a coach, and again, we do have to factor that in. No, I know he hasn't managed, but he's been around the Republic of Ireland set up as well for a number of years. Again, he was at Sheffield United. Again, a long career. So I think he will know that better than anybody else. And there's no better way than to hopefully for them, their perspective, get off to a positive start, maybe get the noise settled down. I think that's what you want when you go in as a new manager. There'll be a lot of talk. Of course, everyone's going to have their opinions, rightly so. The only way you can really settle that down, as you say, is just going out there. I'm sure the boys will respond positively to the news and getting off to a really good start next season.
Let's just talk EFL very quickly before we let you go, because I know you watch as much EFL as pretty much anyone. Let's talk Leicester City. Ruud van Nistelrooy gone, looking for a new head coach with the players, I think, due back for pre-season next week. PSR concerns hanging over the club as well. It looks a worrying time for Leicester, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. We spoke a little bit about it yesterday when we did the fixture release day. They are the club for me that they really needed to get this decision made, whichever way they wanted to go with it, because the uncertainty around that stadium and that football club has, been crazy, really. You don't want to be going into a new season not knowing what's going on, whether that's the fans, whether that's the players. There's still that uncertainty because of potential implications regarding their financial situation. Is it going to be a points deduction? There's a lot of talk about that. So we're not sure exactly what state they're going to be in come the start of the season. But what you can try and control a little bit is who's that man to take you forward. And again, I think everyone at that football club needs to have that decision made as quickly as possible.
Two of the candidates that are being linked very heavily with the job at the moment, Sean Dyche. You wonder whether someone like him would be tempted if he knows what's going on in the background at the club. In contrast, Danny Röhl's obviously a man who likes a challenge, because he's had that at Sheffield Wednesday the last couple of seasons. Oh,
yeah. Well, listen, he's certainly be going from one situation to a potentially difficult, separate situation, Danny Röhl. Someone who I've got great admiration for. I think he's done a brilliant job, often in difficult circumstances. We know everything that's going on around Sheffield Wednesday, and again, off the field issues that are threatening to spill out onto the pitch, unfortunately. So I think from his point of view, I don't know what his future is. It doesn't seem as though it's long-term at that football club, given some of the comments we've heard from the ownership at Sheffield Wednesday. Listen, Sean Dyche, been there, done it, got how many T-shirts, I think would be a very, very good appointment for the level, and probably the kind of person that, again, having had the disappointment of relegation, can go in, sort of clear the decks a little bit, get everybody to make sure they're on the same page. And what they will have, I'm sure, is still a very, very good squad that's capable of going to compete and getting promoted.
Good to speak to you as ever, Joby. Thank you very much. Enjoy your weekend.
Cheers, Rob.
Well, let's just return to Brentford, shall we, with Keith Andrews signing that 3-year contract to become the head coach, which is expected to be announced a little bit later on today. Let's have a look back at his coaching career so far. He started as an assistant at MK Dons and the Republic of Ireland with Stephen Kenny. He then moved on to work under Chris Wilder at Sheffield United before joining Brentford at the start of last season with a particular focus on set pieces. They're among the strongest performers in that category, 14 goals from set pieces, which saw them rank 7th in the Premier League. But it was defensively where Andrews had the most impact, excluding penalties. Brentford conceded just 3 goals from set pieces last season, the best record in the league.